Welcome to this week's vlog, and I want to ask you a question, but let me give you a bit of a background to the question. There's a story in the Gospels, in the Bible, of a man called Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, someone who was hated by most of the population because he was collecting taxes for the occupying Roman authorities. So he wasn't a liked man, but he was probably rich because he was paid by the Romans and he probably siphoned off some of the money for himself. But anyway, he was a bit of an outcast among his own people. And one day Jesus came to his town, and Jesus, as usual, was surrounded by the crowds. And Zacchaeus wanted to look at Jesus. He'd probably heard about him. So he runs ahead and he climbs up a tree so he can see Jesus. Maybe he was a small man. And the interesting thing is that as Jesus comes along the road and he gets to the tree where Zacchaeus is, he looks up and says, "Zacchaeus, come on down. I want to come to your house for tea." So Jesus invites himself to Zacchaeus' home. Now that would have been shocking, excuse me, for those standing around. Why on earth did Jesus want to associate himself with a sinner? A man like Zacchaeus, a tax collector. But anyway, Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house. Zacchaeus welcomes him and he goes in. And when he comes out sometime later, Zacchaeus is a totally changed man. He's left behind his life of avarice when he's interested in money, and he's become someone who believes in Jesus and wants to follow him. So my question for you is this: what happened in Zacchaeus' house when Jesus went to stay? Of course, we don't exactly know because we're not told, but I'm just asking you to imagine what might have happened. While you're thinking about that, let me tell you something that happened to me this week. As I've probably mentioned before, I'm a volunteer with the UCB2 prayer line. UCB, United Christian Broadcast, is a radio station, and they have something called the prayer line. So volunteers are on the end of a phone. So anybody who needs prayer can ring up, and the person who's the volunteer at the time will pray with them. And that's what I do most Mondays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And this week, obviously the calls are absolutely confidential, so I can't share any intimate details. But what I can say is one person rang up, and I'd only been listening to them for maybe 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And when that time had come to an end, when the person had been sharing what's on their heart, they said to me, "Oh, thank you so much for listening. That's made such a big difference, just to have someone to listen to my situation." I hadn't really done anything, but I had listened to that person. I tried to understand their situation, so I could respond with prayer. And thinking about that, I was reminded of another incident many, many years ago, right towards the beginning of the time when I was in active ministry as a Methodist minister. And it was, I think, my first ever funeral that I was asked to take. And I had no experience. I didn't really know what I was doing. But this chap, I had to go and see. His wife had just died. And to be honest, I felt a bit out of my depth. What do I say? How do I handle this? And so I went and sat with this chap whose name was Bill, and we spent some time together. I sought to listen to him, listen to his, tell me about his wife and about how he's feeling in that. And again, I prayed with him at the end, but I really felt I hadn't done a great deal to help him. But again, he said to me, "Thank you so much for listening. That's made such a difference to me." And Bill became a member of our church in that village, and a faithful member. And he was a lovely man. But it's all what's remained with me is the importance of me listening to him and to this other chap on the phone. So Let's go back to the story of Zacchaeus. What happened when Jesus went into Zacchaeus' home? How come it? Zacchaeus was an absolutely changed man. He said, if I've robbed anybody, I'll pay them back many times over. And so from money being his God, now Jesus is the one he serves. So what happened? I think, and I can't prove this, I think Jesus spent a lot of time simply listening to Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, tell me about your life. And then Jesus spoke, I'm sure, words to Zacchaeus that made all the difference. But it's the listening bit. And it's interesting how so many times in the gospel, Jesus is surrounded by a crowd, but he stops for the one person and listens to them. There's a verse in a letter of James which says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It's often said, isn't it, that that's why God gave us 2 ears but only one mouth. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. So my desire is to be a better listener, to really try and hear what people are saying rather than always giving my views. So there's the challenge for me and for all of us. Try to be a better listener, to really hear what people are saying to us, not just pretend we're listening, but our focus is elsewhere. Try and listen with all our heart and mind. Challenge for today. And the great thing is God listens to us. So we should listen to others, to one another. God bless you. Thank you so much for listening today.